When Leroy Hoard began analyzing the Browns' developmental strategy, his frustration was palpable. He argued that the franchise has forgotten the basic blueprint for quarterback success: opportunity and patience. Comparing Shedeur Sanders' situation to the early careers of Patrick Mahomes and
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Lamar Jackson, Hoard made it painfully clear how vital real game exposure is to mastering mechanics like footwork and timing. Yet Sanders, stuck as QB3 and sidelined in favor of veterans, can't access those learning moments. The Browns' insistence on experience over potential has effectively frozen their most promising prospect, a decision Hoard sees as both short-sighted and self-inflicted. Deshaun Watson trade. Hoard's breakdown was more than a critique of coaching choices. It was a mirror held up to a broken organization. The Browns' obsession with quick fixes, from their ill-fated Watson trade to their desperate search for short-term wins, has boxed them into irrelevance. Without trusting the process of development, they've ensured that talents like Sanders remain trapped beneath the weight of systemic. Leroy Hoard walked into the studio and dropped a verbal grenade on the Cleveland Browns, and the shockwaves are still rattling through NFL circles. In an explosive episode of Locked on Browns, Hoard held nothing back as he dismantled the franchise's treatment of quarterback Shedeur Sanders. And what looked like a routine breakdown of depth chart decisions quickly spiraled into a much deeper, much uglier expose of systemic dysfunction inside the Browns organization. What started as commentary turned into a full-blown reckoning. Let's get one thing straight. Hoard wasn't criticizing Sanders. In fact, he made it clear that the problem isn't the player. The problem is the environment. According to Hoard, Sanders isn't being held back because he lacks talent. He's being held back by the Brown structure, their priorities, and a coaching philosophy that values job security over long-term growth. Sanders, currently listed as QB3, is barely getting any meaningful reps, and Hoard didn't sugarcoat why that's happening. He explained that Sanders' mechanics, his footwork, timing, and rhythm can be fixed, but only through reps, only through game action. And right now, the Browns are denying him both. His development is stalled because the team's evaluation process is flawed at its core. Instead of putting in the work to develop a young talent, the Browns are rolling with veteran options like Dillon Gabriel, despite Gabriel's inconsistent play. And Hoard called that out directly. He said it reflects a team that's not interested in building. It's a team that's desperately trying to patch holes and keep the coaching staff employed. There's a difference between growing pains and outright negligence. And Hoard made it clear. What's happening in Cleveland is the latter. The Sanders situation is just the latest example. Hoard's real focus was the bigger picture. The culture. The leadership. The decision-making. He argued that the Browns' issues go far beyond the quarterback room. It's about how the entire franchise operates. And nothing illustrated that more than the Deshaun Watson trade. According to Hoard, the Browns' decision to trade multiple first-round picks for Watson, on top of giving him a record-breaking guaranteed deal, didn't just shake up the roster. It destroyed their flexibility. It handcuffed their ability to develop new talent. And worst of all, it locked them into a win-now mentality without the foundation to actually win. It's a move that put the franchise in survival mode. And survival mode doesn't breed growth. It breeds panic. It breeds bad decisions. It breeds exactly what we're seeing with Sanders. Because now, with draft capital gone and pressure mounting, the Browns are too afraid to take risks. They're clinging to veterans who aren't producing. They're afraid of the headlines if Sanders struggles. Afraid of what it might say about the front office. Afraid of proving themselves wrong. So instead of building toward something, they're stalling, delaying, holding on. Hoard compared the Browns' treatment to Sanders with how successful franchises have brought along quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. Those teams put their young guys in systems that supported growth. They gave them time, but they also gave them real reps. They didn't just sit them on the bench and hope talent would magically develop in the dark. Meanwhile, in Cleveland, Sanders is stuck watching from the sidelines, getting minimal practice opportunities and zero live game experience. And Hoard made it clear, that's not development. That's organizational neglect. And it's not just hurting Sanders. It's hurting the entire team. Because when you pass on developing young players, you end up over-relying on veterans who've already peaked, or worse, who aren't producing at all. That's exactly what's happening with Dillon Gabriel. And yet, the Browns keep putting him out there. Not because he's better, but because he's safer. Hoard called it the illusion of safety. The idea that sticking with the status quo somehow stabilizes the franchise. But it's just that, an illusion. Because the record speaks for itself, 2-6. That's not safe. That's failing slowly. And the longer the Browns wait to give Sanders a real shot, the more they risk losing him, not just physically, but mentally. The window for growth in the NFL is short. And Hoard pointed out that opportunity is everything. Quarterbacks develop through exposure, through in-game learning, not by holding a clipboard and pretending to run the opponent's offense in practice. The Browns, Hoard said, are wasting that opportunity. And not just for Sanders, for the franchise. And while Sanders is the focus, the real story here is the pattern. This isn't the first time the Browns have buried a potential star. It's a repeated failure to evaluate, to plan, and to lead. Hoard described it as a culture problem, a systemic issue where the leadership prioritizes optics over outcomes, where coaches worry more about job security than player development, where decisions are made to survive the week, not to build the next year. And you know what? He's not wrong. Because if there was a vision, Sanders wouldn't be sitting. If there was a long-term plan, the Browns wouldn't be defaulting to the same losing formula week after week. And if there was a real belief in Sanders' potential, they wouldn't be hiding him behind a layer of caution. That's not protecting a player. That's burying one. Hoard also addressed something Browns fans don't hear enough. Sanders does have potential. And it's not just hype or a famous last name. It's his presence, his leadership, the intangibles. Hoard acknowledged those qualities, but warned they don't last forever if you don't nurture them. That kind of confidence fades when a player feels forgotten. And if Cleveland keeps down this road, they're going to squander it. Not because Sanders wasn't good enough, but because they never gave him the chance to become what he could be. At the heart of all this, Hoard's message was simple. Talent without opportunity is just wasted potential. And right now, the Browns are sitting on potential they clearly don't know what to do with. So the fallout from his comments wasn't just about Sanders. It was about a franchise that keeps cycling through dysfunction. A team that's stuck in a loop, failing to plan, failing to pivot, and failing to grow. And unless something changes, it won't stop with Sanders. It'll happen again, and again, and again. Hoard may have sparked backlash. He may have ruffled feathers. But his criticism struck a nerve because it exposed the truth. Cleveland's real issue isn't under center. It's at the top. And until that gets fixed, no amount of quarterback controversy will matter. Because you can't win in this league if your entire foundation is broken. If you're watching this and you're a Browns fan, let it out in the comments. What do you think is holding this team back? If you're just tired of watching young talent get wasted across the league, hit that like button. Share this with someone who's still clinging to hope in Cleveland. And subscribe for more stories like this. Because the NFL never stops giving us drama. And we'll be right here to break it down. Every meltdown. Every mess. Every missed. So now that the dust is still settling from Leroy Hoard's scorching rant on Locked on Browns, we need to ask the real question that's been hanging in the air like a bad contract. Where does this franchise go from here? Because if Hoard's take did anything, it wasn't just stirring up headlines. It forced people to stop and confront a truth they've been dodging for years. The Cleveland Browns don't have a quarterback problem. They have a culture problem. And Shedeur Sanders? He just happens to be the latest casualty. Let's not act like Hoard dropped some out-of-pocket hot take just to stir the pot. Everything he said was backed by what the Browns themselves have shown us. Week after week. Year after year. Hoard didn't speculate. He laid it out. Inconsistency at the top. Reactionary decision-making. Roster management that's all about Band-Aids and no surgery. And most damning of all, An organization that keeps asking for long-term results while only making short-term moves. He wasn't venting. He was reporting from the front lines of dysfunction. And while fans were quick to either praise or condemn him, depending on how deep their loyalty runs, it's hard to deny that he hit a nerve. Because at the core of his breakdown was this brutal point. The Browns are more concerned with looking like they're in control than actually being in control. That's why Shedeur Sanders is still sitting. That's why Dillon Gabriel, with all his inconsistency, keeps getting snaps. That's why the Watson trade, no matter how badly it's aging, still controls every decision the front office makes. It's not about who's ready. It's about who's politically safe to put on the... And if you've followed this team for more than 5 minutes, that should sound familiar. Because this isn't just about a misstep, it's about a cycle. One that swallowed up more quarterbacks than most franchises could even draft in a decade. Quarterback development in Cleveland doesn't fail because of talent. It fails because there's no infrastructure to support it. Hoard made that point clear when he talked about Sanders' mechanics. Yes, his footwork needs work. Yes, he needs reps, but none of that happens by accident. No quarterback refines their game while buried on the scout team. Those growth moments come from trial and error, on the field, in real time, under the lights. And right now, Sanders isn't getting any of that. He's not being set up to succeed. He's being sidelined to protect a narrative the coaching staff is desperate to keep intact. That they're still in control. That they have a plan. That this season isn't slipping through their fingers. But let's be real. A 2-6 record is the slip. It's the proof. It's the very thing Hoard was trying to point out. This team is flailing and pretending to fly. And in the process, they're sitting on a quarterback who could potentially be the spark they desperately need. The Browns aren't just denying Sanders a chance. They're denying themselves an opportunity to get clarity on the future. Because even if he struggles early, that experience would be invaluable. You either develop him or you know you have to move on. But right now, they're in quarterback purgatory. No movement. No progress. Just paralysis. It's the most dangerous kind of failure, quiet failure. The kind that creeps in behind buzzwords like stability and protecting the locker room. That's exactly what Hoard was warning about. And it's why his words hit so hard. Because deep down, even the most loyal fans can see it. This team is terrified to evolve. They're scared of admitting the Watson trade was a mistake. Scared of what it would look like to bench a vet for a rookie. Scared of igniting a new quarterback controversy they don't have the PR bandwidth to. So instead of making bold decisions, they make safe ones. Except those safe decisions, they're leading to losing seasons. And that's the irony Hoard couldn't ignore. He pointed to Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson as examples not just of talent, but of systems that supported that talent. Teams that didn't just draft a guy and hope for the best. They built around them, gave them tailored coaching, real snaps, real pressure, and real belief. Sanders isn't getting any of that in Cleveland. And if nothing changes, he never will. The thing that stings the most is that this isn't just a mistake. It's a choice. The Browns are actively choosing a course of action that preserves mediocrity. They're not losing because they don't know better. They're losing because they refuse to do. And Hoard called that out in a way that couldn't be ignored. He wasn't just throwing shade. He was exposing a mindset. A culture where coaches care more about Monday's press conference than Sunday's scoreboard. A leadership structure so rattled by past failures that it's now afraid to try anything that might actually fix them. But if you're not developing talent, what are you doing? That's the million-dollar question. Because talent is the most precious resource in this league. And when you don't develop it, you don't just lose games. You lose years. You set your franchise back. You alienate your fan base. And you create a reputation that lingers for decades. Ask any veteran player. Reputation in this league matters. It sticks. And if Cleveland keeps burying potential stars under layers of fear and dysfunction, it won't just cost them wins. It'll cost them opportunities. Because no rising talent wants to walk into a system where the ceiling is capped by leadership insecurity. And that's what this is really about. Not just Shedeur Sanders, but the culture he's been dropped into. One that values predictability over progress. One that talks about player development while actively avoiding the hard decisions required to make it happen. Hoard didn't just challenge the Browns to play Sanders. He challenged them to wake up, to stop repeating the same cycle and expecting a different result, to stop acting like quarterback controversies are the problem when the real issue is the system they keep forcing those quarterbacks into. And while some analysts tried to spin Hoard's comments as harsh, the reality is they were necessary. Because this is what accountability looks like. Someone calling it like it is. No filters. No front office polish. Just the raw, uncomfortable. The Browns are on the clock. Not just this season, but organizationally. They can keep hiding behind their veterans and hoping for the best. Or they can finally admit that what they've been doing isn't working and give Sanders the opportunity to prove whether or not he's part of the solution. Because if they wait too long, the decision will be made for them. And by then, the damage may already be done. And look, this crossroads the Browns are standing at, it's not theoretical anymore. It's real, it's visible, and it's urgent. Because whether they want to admit it or not, they're running out of room to stall. The excuses are drying up. The roster is aging in all the wrong places. The cap space is clogged. The draft picks are gone. And the one thing they could still develop, the future, is standing on the sidelines in full uniform, headset on, learning absolutely nothing that will help him when his time finally comes. That's the core of Leroy Hoard's frustration. Not that Shedeur Sanders is benched, but that the team is pretending there's logic to it. There's no logic in denying reps to a player you claim to believe in. There's no logic in protecting a 2-6 season like it's some fragile masterpiece. And there's definitely no logic in prioritizing coaching optics over quarterback development. But that's exactly what's happening in Cleveland. Let's call it what it is. The Browns are stuck in a false dilemma. They think they have to pick between winning now or building for later. Hoard's whole argument destroys that narrative. You can develop talent and compete. You can prepare for the future without surrendering the present. The only thing stopping that balance is poor leadership. And this coaching staff, this front office, they're not making bold moves. They're making scared ones. They're not betting on upside. They're protecting tenure. Every game plan, every depth chart, every press conference is about damage control, not direction. That's why Hoard's breakdown felt less like an opinion and more like an intervention. Because you can't fix what you refuse to acknowledge. And right now, the Browns are doing what they've always done, doubling down on bad strategy and hoping no one notices the foundation cracking underneath. But people are noticing. Loudly. Fans are tired. Players are frustrated. And analysts like Hoard, they're not mincing words anymore. And here's the wildest part. Hoard did give Sanders credit. He acknowledged the raw qualities, the leadership, the presence, the calm under pressure. All things that can't be taught, but absolutely can be lost if a player is kept on the shelf too long. It doesn't matter who your father is. It doesn't matter how many headlines your name generates. If you're stuck as QB3 in an organization that refuses to prepare you properly, that potential will fade. That edge will dull. And eventually, that window will close. And the Browns? They'll look up in 2 seasons and realize they never even gave him a fair shot. That's the cycle. That's what Hoard was trying to snap them out of. And yet, the organization continues to act like there's no urgency, as if this is all part of some carefully planned timeline. But let's be real, there is no timeline. There's only the now. And now is where Sanders isn't developing. Now is where Dillon Gabriel is still being thrown out there despite glaring inconsistencies. Now is where a team that gave up multiple first-round picks for Deshaun Watson has no clear succession plan, no growth track, and no real direction. And at this point, what's the downside of playing Sanders? Hoard laid it out plain and simple. If Gabriel isn't moving the needle, and he isn't, then what are you risking by giving Sanders a shot? At worst, you confirm that he needs more work. At best, you find a spark, a future, a reason to believe this team can do something right for once. Because the damage isn't coming from putting a rookie out too early. The real damage is in never putting him out there at all. You think Mahomes learned by osmosis? You think Lamar Jackson turned into an MVP because he sat quietly and watched? No. They played. They made mistakes. They took hits. They got coached in real time. Development in the NFL is not a theoretical process. It's trial by fire. And if you don't let the quarterback feel the heat, he'll never learn how to handle it. Right now, Sanders is being denied that, and that's where Hoard's critique hits hardest. Because the Browns don't seem to care about learning anymore. They're just trying to survive each week without more headlines, without more pressure, without more fans calling into radio shows asking why this team still doesn't have a plan. But the fans see it. They're not fooled. They know this isn't about Sanders' footwork. It's about organizational foot dragging. They know this isn't about development. It's about delay. It's about fear. It's about refusing to try anything new, even when the current approach is clearly broken. Hoard simply said what everyone's been thinking. This team isn't failing in spite of its decisions. It's failing because of them. You can't sit on a prospect like Sanders and call it strategy. That's not development. That's deflection. And unless the Browns overhaul their mindset from the top down, it's only a matter of time before they squander yet another potential franchise quarterback. Not because he didn't have it, but because they never gave him a chance to show it. So if you're a Browns fan still holding out hope, ask yourself this. How many more talented QBs need to be buried under this cycle before the team finally changes course? And if you're tired of seeing young talent stuck behind caution and incompetence, hit the like button. Let your voice be heard in the comments. What do you think the Browns need to do with Sanders right now? Share this with someone who's been screaming at their TV for weeks. And subscribe, because the NFL doesn't slow down, and we'll be here to catch every messy, chaotic, painfully avoidable moment of it.